days at the stick. From who's got it better than us to brick by brick. It's always the 49ers way, from off-season to game day. Yeah, we talk back. It's the 49ers Cutback.
It's 49ers Cutback podcast time. Welcome to the show, everyone. We're going to be talking about joint practices, what we learned. And we did learn some things about the San Francisco 49ers. Now, these are not hardened truths. These are not things that are going to stay the same because everything is evolving in football. But what it does is it gives us a status update. Several players that are making strides, doing things the right way in training camp. What it does is illustrate where the 49ers are at in the process of getting ready for the regular season. And there's a lot of things that you can take away from this in a positive light. There's some negatives of course, but as coaches usually say, those are coaching points. So that's what Kyle Shanahan and the coaching staff is going to do from this film. They just like the fact that they got it playing against a different team who runs a different scheme. And yes, they want to be successful, right? They want to block well. They want to run the football well, catch the ball well, go through the reads the way they're supposed to. But they also don't mind having plays that didn't work out, having lack of execution or things that didn't hold up, so that way they can work on it. That's one of the key elements, is getting this on film, so that way you can show your players where you're deficient, things you need to work on. Maybe you can find weaknesses as a coach, so that way you can use it to your advantage or find a way to negate that as a weakness. And one of the things I always try to talk about every single offseason is the fact you don't game plan. You're not game planning for joint practices. You're not game planning for preseason games. You're going out there with a specific set of plays on offense you want to run and certain looks you want to show on defense, but you're not going out there with a unique game plan the way you do for the regular season. And this is just something that's tried and true for, all teams around the league, and even in college football. And when you get into, high school football, everybody does this because it's not exactly about what the other team's doing early on. It's what your team's doing. And so that's what's always fun about this time, is because you're going to have guys who struggle. You're going to have guys who excel, and you get to see kind of who's who, and you get to see who's the dogs and who's the guys that you need to probably get on a little bit more, work a little bit harder. And so it's a fun time. And the 49ers right now are dealing with a lot of injuries. So the 49ers we saw as far as joint practices is not the 49ers that will probably line up week 1 against Seattle. Who knows? It's probably not even the 49ers that will line up in the third preseason game against the Chargers. This is an ever-evolving roster, right? It's a living, breathing thing is what I like to say, because it's going to have all different kinds of movements with injuries, with 49ers making decisions on depth pieces. It's going to change. In fact, it'll probably change by the time you watch this. That is just how things work in the NFL. And so it's always interesting when we get into this time of year and just all the movement and all the things that happen. But in this episode, we're going to take a deep dive into joint practices. We're going to talk about how that relates to the preseason game coming up against the Broncos, because this is probably the best look at the 49ers was joint practice. The preseason game is going to be more of a look at a lot of the backups. We're going to get a real good look at Mac Jones at the quarterback position. We're going to get a good look at young players like Upton Stout and Marquis Siegel, and that's going to be exciting, right, to see Alfred Collins and these guys playing against the Denver Broncos. It's not going to be first-team units for either team, more than likely, and there's going to be a lot of guys going out there and competing for roster spots, and that's exciting too. But 49ers football is going to be back. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I really appreciate it. If you're listening on audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe Network, please give it a 5-star rating. Now, FanDuel is the title sponsor of this episode of 49ers Cutback, and FanDuel, I'll tell you what you're going to get if you use FanDuel. What you'll find at FanDuel is in week 1, the 49ers versus Seahawks, FanDuel's got a full menu of betting options for the NFC West clash. Standard bets, which is spread, total points, money line, player props, Brock Purdy passing yards, Christian McCaffrey rushing totals, George Kittle TDs, and Ricky Pearsall receiving yards. And Pearsall had himself a day at joint practices. Same game parlay, stack picks like 49ers to cover, McCaffrey to score, and game total to go over. quarter-by-quarter action, first quarter lines, and player performance markets. You get all that with FanDuel. Go check it out. There's even betting lines on the preseason if that's what you're interested in doing. Check out FanDuel. But let's talk a lot about what happened with joint practices. And I think it's very important to start with who wasn't on the field for the San Francisco 49ers. These are guys who have injuries, were sitting out. And I got to start with the fact that Trent Williams wasn't injured, but Trent Williams did not play in 11-on-11. So you didn't ever get your starting offensive line per se. And I know that, that's one guy, but we know the effect that Trent Williams has on an offensive line. He can stabilize one side. So that, we got to remember, affects the overall success rate of that offensive line, which struggled a little bit against the Denver Broncos. Can't sugarcoat it. That's just the way it is. They struggled a little bit against the Broncos, and the Broncos have a pretty good defensive line. So we could take that for what it was. But guys who did not participate was Evan Anderson. He's still dealing with the knee bruise, and that made the 49ers go sign Michael Dwumlefore. He's going to be, coming in. 49ers have had him on the roster before. He's also been with the Houston Texans. He's familiar with the scheme. Is he a player that's going to make this roster? Probably not. He's going to come in and compete and see if he can get on the 49ers practice squad, put together some good tape. But that's why Evan Anderson out. Jair Brown missed, which meant Richie Grant got significant snaps in joint practices against the Denver Bronco. That helps Richie Grant. More opportunity to go seize a spot. So Jair's dealing with an ankle. Cowling still with a hamstring. He's supposed to work his way back next week. So we'll be on the lookout for Jacob Cowling. Jordan Elliott dealing with a back issue. Kyle Shanahan revealed he's expected to be back next week. So you've got a potential starter in Jordan Elliott along the defensive line that wasn't available for joint practices. Keep that in mind when you hear that, some of the defensive line didn't do great. We'll talk about that more. Kevin Givens, of course, he's going to be out for a long time with the pec. Renardo Green, he's supposed to be back next week. Isaac Garendo, he's dealing with a shoulder. He's not going to be back until the regular season. Jordan James, unfortunately, broke his finger during joint practices. He's going to have surgery. He's going to be out a couple weeks. So he didn't really go into 11-on-11s. Juwan Jennings dealing with a calf. Fabian Moreau, one of the 49ers' new signings, don't know exactly why he didn't go out there and practice. We'll wait and hear what happens with that. 49ers also released Eli Apple, the veteran cornerback, to make room for Dwumlefore. So you've got Fabian Moreau not in there. Eli Apple was gone. Sam Okuwanu, he's out with the groin. He's going to be back in a few weeks. Probably more likely the regular season for Sam Okuwanu. And Chaz Surratt, don't really know why Chaz Surratt wasn't out there, but missing an opportunity to get key snaps. And he's in a competition to make this 53-man roster. So not a good way for Chaz Surratt, to kind of have an opportunity to make this team. But Robert Saleh does know Surratt, and so does Brant Boyer. That will help him a little bit, but, a little bit scary still. We also, of course, are without Brandon Ayuk, Andre Dillard, Yetur Gross-Matos, and Malik Mustafa. Gross-Matos and Dillard could start coming back next week in the Raiders week. That's what Kyle Shanahan has said. We'll see what happens with them. But as you can see, lots of guys that the 49ers don't have on the practice field right now to go joint practices against Denver Bronco. It's definitely not the strongest 49ers team, but you got to go out there and compete with who you got, right? It's the next up mentality, the real thing in the NFL, and football in general. You got to have guys who can step in. That's what you're trying to do, build depth on your roster. We'll see what the 49ers do. Now, Mikael Williams was playing really well during joint practices, setting a firm edge against Mike McGlinchey, looking like a solid player in the run game. And then he goes down with a knee injury, and everyone gasped. Everyone was concerned about Mikael Williams. Who is it that was down first? Then once it's realized it's Mikael Williams, as he slowly gets up after being examined by a medical professional, he got up and he gingerly walked out, eventually walked all the way to the locker room, and Kyle Shanahan luckily informs everyone that Mikael Williams is dealing with a hyperextended knee, but that they believe he's structurally sound. Now, we'll see what the medical reports come out. He's going to have more testing, but it seems that Mikael Williams dodged a bullet there, and they think it's just a hyperextended knee, which saying just a hyperextended knee is kind of interesting. Now, Darrell Luter Jr. and Marquise Siegel also left joint practices and were evaluated for concussions, but were cleared, so they will be ready to go and play in the preseason debut against the Denver Broncos. So that's good news for the 49ers. Now that we've got who was out there and who wasn't as far as participants, we can start talking about some of the guys who really showed up and showed out at joint practices. And we're going to start with Nick Bosa. Nick Bosa didn't have tons of success in one-on-ones, but when he got into 11-on-11, he went out there and tore it up. And there were so many question marks about Bosa missing practices. And I kind of alluded to this a couple days ago that it was probably soreness, and that's in fact what it was. It was soreness for Nick Bosa. It's smart if you start getting really sore to take a couple of days off, especially as a veteran. You don't want to overwork your muscles and come into a situation where you have a strain or a pull. You just don't want those types of things to happen. So he took the days off. He came out. He was ready to compete, and he would have had like 3 sacks during joint practices just to show you the effect that Nick Bosa was having rushing out there against a pretty good Denver Broncos offensive line. Now, we know he can work against Mike McGlinchey. Those guys have a lot of experience going against each other, and I went to way too many training camps where Nick Bosa was cooking Mike McGlinchey. But with that being said, he's still looking like he's getting back into form, and this is looking like we're preparing for Nick Bosa to have an extremely bounce-back year. Now, I don't think last year was bad, but it definitely wasn't up to the level that we've seen from Nick Bosa consistently, and he is going to be a real problem. And one of the things that's going to be awesome is his counterpart, Bryce Huff, who's going to rush on obvious pass downs. He looked electric as well going against the Denver Broncos, and his speed was on display when he went against McGlinchey as he absolutely ran right past him, got around him and flattened out. He's going to be a little bit of a problem as well. That speed, the technique, using his hands, he looks good as well. So Huff is in good form, and you've got Nick Bosa looking like he's ready to go. And that's going to be important for the 49ers as we need to generate defensive pass rush off the edge. And you've got some injuries at the position, right? You've got Sam Okuwadu, who's out, Yetur Gross-Matos, who hasn't come in yet, Mikael Williams, who goes down. You're going to need those guys to close it down. You got to have Nick Bosa and Huff be able to close it down, and so far, they're proving that they can do that. Now, one of the guys who was going viral on social media during the joint practices was Upton Stout. And we've been talking about Upton Stout for a while on the channel because he's a guy that fits very nice into the 49er scheme, but if he hits, it makes the entire secondary better. You have Renardo Green, you have De'Amari Lenore, but if you get Upton Stout, that dog, to play the nickel corner spot, it changes the dynamics of that cornerback room because now Renardo Green stays outside, De'Amari Lenore stays outside, and you can really let Upton Stout go. And part of the reason we like him is his aggressiveness in the run game, coming up in run fits. Now, how quickly was he going to figure out where exactly he was supposed to be in run fits? That was a question mark. Well, he comes out, he starts studding it up, making plays in the backfield, 3 yards deep in the backfield, lighting people up. That is huge. Upton Stout making plays in one-on-ones, pass breakups. We've seen him do this to Ricky Pearsall in 7-on-7s. He was doing the same thing to the Denver Broncos wide receivers. He's sticky, he's physical, and he gets after it. And that's what we needed from Upton Stout, and that's what we're seeing right now. I would say Upton Stout is probably performing the best of any rookie right now. And I think this is the one that when we came out of the draft, of the top 5 picks that were all defensive players, that probably got questioned the most. It was either Nick Martin, who went in the 3rd round, or Upton Stout. Now, I was a big fan of Upton Stout. When he got drafted, I said I thought he was a dog by every sense of the word, and that's exactly what he is. That's what you see when you watch Upton Stout, is a dog. He competes on every single play. And, it's funny, I saw in the comments section, people were already saying, hey, Upton Stout's becoming the one I'm the most excited to see. And I think that's something great. The 49ers fans are going to love watching it. I even heard, people talking about him and the shark, having their thing. Maybe he's a tiger shark. I just think he's a dog. And, him and De'Amari Lenore are feeding off each other right now. It is great to have Upton Stout out there showing out and making plays. Now, if you want to talk about a couple of guys that have been criticized over the last couple of years, and one of them just this year, but, Robert Beal Jr., who the 49ers drafted a couple years ago. And the big talk was all GTFO for Robert Beal Jr. And it was, can he get off the ball quick enough? And that was what it was all about. And then it was funny because we were thinking that he was going to have a problem setting the edge in the run game because he was a guy that was super fast off the edge, could possibly present pass rush scenarios, right? He was the Bryce Huff pass rush defensive end. Well, that has not been what's happened since he's been in the league. In fact, they put so much focus on him stopping the run, he became a pretty good run stopper. Last year, he was very effective, especially down the stretch. Not to mention, he's a really good special teams player. But Robert Beal Jr.'s question marks coming into the season was not, can he stop the run? It was, can he rush the passer consistently? And we needed to see some pass rush for him to have a chance to make this team because you have depth at defensive end if everyone's healthy, right? You have Bosa, you have Mikael Williams, you have Yetur Gross-Matos, you have Bryce Huff, then you have Sam Okawadu, then you have Robert Beal. Are you going to keep 6 defensive ends if everyone's healthy? That's a big question mark. Well, Robert Beal Jr. went out there and was having some pretty good successful reps during one-on-ones, and that translated to 11-on-11s. Robert Beal Jr. was getting in the backfield, could have had a sack, right? You don't know for sure in practice because you don't hit the quarterback. But Robert Beal Jr. showing some ability to get home, that is much needed. That elevates his game, and that makes him into the conversation for making the 49ers 53. Now, I did a 53-man roster prediction over on Patreon pre-training camp. And I will tell you this, I did have Robert Beal Jr. making it. Now, I did have the caveat that I had the 49ers keeping extra defensive ends, and he was one of them. And so it's not like I had him beating out Sam Okawanu or anything like that, but I thought he was just too valuable when you looked at special teams. But if he can rush the passer, if he can present at least a decent pass rush, and he could set the edge the way that he's done down the stretch last season, he's a solid base down defensive end for the 49ers, and he's still a big physical athlete. So this is something interesting. Let's see how Robert Beal Jr. develops over the remainder of preseason. Maybe he could go out there and show some things and become the player the 49ers were hoping. Maybe it took him a couple years to develop and get used to the system, being able to set the edge in the run game and still be able to get home, right? Setting the edge was probably the most important thing for Chris Kasarik, turning him into a complete defensive end. So that's good news. Also, Alfred Collins had some really good reps. I don't know if you guys have seen the one where he drives the offensive guard back and then, boom, completely throws him forward and gets home. It's a great rep for Alfred Collins. And what's nice about watching Alfred Collins and his kind of growth in this 49er system is this is what we've seen from Chris Kasarik when he works with defensive tackles that are adjusting to his system. The first thing he does is focus completely on getting off the ball quickly and lower pad level, which usually means bull rushes. He doesn't want them moving sideways. He doesn't want them to elevate their pads as they're trying to use swim moves, and other techniques will elevate you a little bit. It's all about low, getting off the ball quickly, and pad level, and that's what we saw from Alfred Collins on that rep, and he had that offensive guard on skates. So you're seeing some of the potential of Alfred Collins. Now, we know Alfred Collins is behind when it comes to learning this system, developing in this system, compared to some of the other players who were available during the offseason. But I would say he's ahead of a guy like Javon Kinlaw, who I saw going through training camp. Right now, Alfred Collins is a little bit further along in Kinlaw than Kinlaw was, getting used to Chris Kasarik's wide nine scheme, the aggressive style. So this is good. Seeing some of those things is really good. Now, Sebastian Valdez had another good day out there at joint practices. He was winning on his one-on-ones, less successful in 11-on-11s, but still successful. And so this is good news. The 49ers have another guy that's in the mix. And this puts a little bit of a strain at defensive tackle for some of the depth pieces in the back. You know, guys like Kalia Davis, guys like Evan Anderson, who's not practicing right now. Can Sebastian Valdez beat him out? We know CJ West and Alfred Collins are going to make this football team. We know Jordan Elliott's likely going to make this team. Now, a spot opened up with Kevin Givens probably starting the season on IR. That means that Sebastian Valdez has got to beat out Davis or Evan Anderson. One of those guys is not going to be on the team, and Kalia Davis didn't have a very good joint practice. It was not terrible, but it wasn't really good either, right? It wasn't what we saw last year in the preseason. that's something that he's going to have to get better at. So we're seeing these guys kind of make plays, the young guys, Mikael Williams, Alfred Collins, Sebastian Valdez, getting out there and doing some things, and a little bit of development from Robert Beal Jr., which means, hey, they're getting to it. They're getting some work, and that's what's important. Now, probably the superstar, if you're not talking about Upton Stout on defense, was D. Winters. And this shocks nobody if you've been on the channel, because D. Winters looked special when I've seen him at training camp. He's just a step ahead right now, right? And it was always the thing with D. Winters was, when was it going to click? And he has all the necessary athleticism, all the speed. He showed in college that he has, supreme instincts. The guy looked like he was blitzing, even on plays he wasn't, because he just read things so quickly. He put an emphasis on learning opposing offenses, understanding different concepts and schemes, and now we're starting to see it play out. One of the most impressive plays I saw was him stopping Garendo at practice, a week ago. And I thought it was just so good to see what he could do out there on the field in the run game. And that was one of the things I was the most concerned about. Well, guess what? He's not only making plays in the passing game where he's running with running backs down the sideline stride for stride, which we've seen him do over the last couple of years, but he's also moving downhill. He's running over the top of offensive linemen, getting over there across their face and making plays. This is the best D. Winters that we've seen. This is the D. Winters, if you're losing Dre Greenlaw, that you had to see. And so we're seeing him kind of step into the limelight and step into this role. And I think it's not surprising that you see D. Winters taking steps forward as Robert Saleh comes in. Robert Saleh, DeMeco Ryans' defense has been very linebacker friendly throughout the last, several years. Now, of course, we've had two different defensive coordinators over the last 2 years, but we're seeing a return to form, and we're seeing D. Winters grow. And sometimes it just takes time, right? Guys we thought maybe weren't hitting as draft picks. A guy like D. Winters, who was really built off of what he could be potential-wise. A guy like Robert Beal Jr., built off potential-wise, late round draft picks, 5th and 6th round draft picks, who might round into form. D. Winters now is a starter, and Robert Beal Jr. maybe as a depth piece. So this is some good news for the 49ers, but D. Winters is absolutely stabilizing that linebacker room, because he's going to be on the field 100% of the time with Fred Warner. It's going to be Fred, it's going to be D. And this gives Nick Martin a chance to develop, because Nick Martin was making, guess what, rookie mistakes. He doesn't look as clean, as comfortable playing linebacker. And I talked about this, watching him go through his linebacker drills at training camp, and there are times he's making mistakes, false steps, not getting his drops correctly. This is to be expected with a young rookie. Not everybody can come in and make a lot of big-time plays like Upton Stout. Now, Stout has his things that he's working on too. It's just he's further along in the process. And so when Nick Martin gets it and he clicks, we're going to talk about things like we talk about D. Winters, right? The speed, the athleticism, the big-time hit potential. So this is great news for the 49ers. They needed him to step up, and he was a real problem. And Robert Saleh was bringing the blitzes, right? Jason Pinnock, what was Jason Pinnock? We talked about this. The best blitzing safety in the NFL last year. Go look at it. His PFF grade was the best. He came in, had a would-be sack on Bo Nix. We talked about Upton Stout when he was drafted. He's going to be a big part of the blitzing for Robert Saleh. He blitzed. Big-time opportunity for him to get a sack. D. Winters, great blitzer at TCU. Well, now he's getting used as a blitzer. And we've seen Robert Saleh using those guys, and he loves bringing guys from the slot where he can generate pressure and put a lot of pressure on the offensive line and the skilled players to be able to pick up those guys, recognize it and pick it up. Sometimes you get a free shot. What it also does is prevent a quarterback from getting outside the pocket. And if you bring pressure in their face, a lot of times you can get them to roll the opposite way. So you get a right-hander, you bring pressure from his face, and he wants to roll to the left. What that does is make it a little bit more difficult to make that throw. So you can kind of generate what happens in a play. You can cut half the field off when it comes to coverage if you can generate pressure. And Robert Saleh is doing it, and that's part of the reason D. Winters, Upton Stout, Jason Pinnock fit really nice with his defense, because those are some of the things he's going to want to use. Now, one of the conversation points about the offense was the fact that Brock Purdy threw a couple of interceptions. And How many years ago was it now that Jimmy Garoppolo threw like 6 interceptions during a joint practice, and everyone kind of lost their minds? I think we understand now that you don't have to do that you don't have to worry about interceptions at training camp, interceptions at joint practice. Like, these aren't concerns that you need to have. These are just normal things that come up from time to time. You're going to try to make plays. You're going to make mistakes. Defenses are going to confuse you, but you're going to be fine. And so I don't mind Brock Purdy throwing some interceptions. He was very, on point about he felt like it was an up and down day for the offense, and it was. It wasn't extremely effective at all times. Brock Purdy made some big-time plays, though, too. Big, deep pass to Ricky Pearsall for a touchdown. That was dropping it in the bucket. You see the things that Brock Purdy does, but also Christian McCaffrey looked really, really good. And this is one of the things we've talked about, is the fact that Christian McCaffrey, he looks back. I know they're monitoring his reps. They're keeping him fresh, and you had Brian Baldinger talking about when Christian McCaffrey falls off, he's going to fall off. He hasn't fallen off. If you see Christian McCaffrey and you think he's fallen off, I don't know what to tell you. And I don't think Brian Baldinger thinks that right now. He's just saying when it happens. But Christian McCaffrey looks absolutely fantastic out there, making plays in the red zone, getting an opportunity to get into the end zone, which he does. But you also had a couple of his weapons stepping up. Number one, Ricky Pearsall. We talked about the one down the field. Pearsall was great in one-on-ones, but really good in 11-on-11s in the limited snaps that he got. Pearsall didn't play a lot of snaps, but was very effective, getting open. And this is something that we've talked about with Pearsall. He can create separation on his own. Now, Kyle can scheme it up, and he's going to get some open looks. He's going to have opportunities for Yak. But Pearsall was making big-time plays. But he's not the only one. How about rookie counterpart Jordan Watkins? And when Watkins was taken, a lot of people had concerns. And the one thing that stood out was the speed element. But what was the route running going to look like? And that was a good criticism, because he didn't run an extensive route tree in college. He had a lot of times where if the play was going the opposite side of the field, he was just kind of jogging. And that was by design. That wasn't his fault. That is what was asked of him. But Jordan Watkins is excelling in the 49ers offense. And I had talked about the fact I've seen him make some plays during training camp. Well, he was making plays during joint practices. Winning one-on-ones on verticals, that's impressive, right? Beating those cornerbacks. I mean, it's tough for those corners to stick with those guys, but you want to see him be able to do that. But in 11-on-11s, catching slant passes and being able to get yak yardage after that, Watkins is stepping up. And it's a lot to ask of a rookie to play successfully within Kyle Shanahan's system, but he's doing a very good job. So we talked about Upton Stout, a young rookie making a huge impact on defense. Can Jordan Watkins do the same thing? A little bit tougher for Watkins, right? I know Jennings is dealing with an injury, but Jennings is ahead of him. Ricky Pearsall is ahead of him. Demarcus Robinson's ahead of him, and Demarcus Robinson continues to look phenomenal. And when Jacob Cowan comes back, what will that mean? But I'll tell you this: Jordan Watkins is proving that he's going to have an opportunity to make an impact on this team. We've seen Ronnie Bell in his rookie season, and I'm not saying that they're the same player. I'm just saying rookie to rookie. Ronnie Bell had some key opportunities for catches. Now, he didn't succeed in those opportunities, but I think the same thing can happen for Jordan Watkins. He can have those opportunities. And if he makes the plays, you're going to see an expanded role. So I don't think it's out of the question now that Jordan Watkins can help the 49ers football team in 2025 with some key catches and some plays down the field vertically, but also some plays over the middle. He runs good crossing routes. He runs good slants. I think this is good news for the 49ers, getting a player that could step in and make some plays. And right now, the 49ers have to count on some of the young guys with some of the question marks with the veterans. You have Juwan Jennings dealing with the calf, so we're going to see a lot of Watkins during the preseason, of course. Demarcus Robinson is going to play during the preseason probably, but when is he going to be suspended and how long is that suspension going to be? It has been rumored it's going to be 3 games, but right now, nothing from the league, crickets. So we don't know when that's going to happen, but Demarcus Robinson continues to look really good. I mean, Brock Purdy, last touchdown of the day was a 14-yard strike to Demarcus Robinson. So you're seeing the 49ers wide receivers, and I feel comfortable with Pearsall, Demarcus Robinson, Juwan Jennings, But I also feel pretty comfortable with other guys. Guys like Jordan Watkins and Russell Gage. Russell Gage especially. Kyle Shanahan said Russell Gage is back to the form he was before his injury a couple years ago. And when you watch Russell Gage play with Tom Brady in that 2021 season or 2020 season, he was fantastic. And so if you can get that guy who's had 2 seasons of 750 yards plus back in the lineup making plays as a veteran, I think it's very important, for that to happen. So you've got some guys that are making some plays for the 49ers. And, the 49ers are looking at joint practices. It's probably more important than preseason games. But preseason, as far as against the Broncos, is more important is still important for some of the guys who are on the back end of the roster. So joint practices, you really played your starters. You got a really good look in a controlled environment and controlled situations and certain types of things you want to look at, right? Red zone offense, short yardage, some of the things you wanted to make sure you focused on, 2-minute offense. These are all important things for you to work on that you might not be able to predict in a preseason game. Well, now in preseason game, you've got guys you want to see step up, make plays, and continue to evolve. What did they learn from joint practices? How much better is Nick Martin? Is Upton Stout coming out and being even more successful? You want to see growth. What will Alfred Collins and CJ West and these guys do in the game? Now, Mikael Williams won't be playing, but a lot of the other guys will be. And it's going to be a nice evaluation point for the San Francisco 49ers at, practices. And so we've got practices, we've got preseason games Saturday night, preseason 49ers versus Denver Broncos. This is going to be a really good time to look at some of the competitions. And I just highlighted those earlier this week that they're kind of coming into focus. Upton Stout locked into a competition with Trey Brown and Dallas Flowers. And guess what? Dallas Flowers had himself another good joint practice, and Trey Brown didn't look bad as well. So those guys are in the mix. At safety, right, you've got Richie Grant trying to work in to become a starter. You've got some other guys that are going to have an opportunity. Guys like Derek Canteen, who also had a great blitz off the edge for Robert Saleh as he's been working into free safety. So you've got some good things happening with some of these young players. Now we get to see all these young players in action. I'm excited for it. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I really appreciate it. If you're listening on audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe Network, please give it a 5-star rating. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Go check them out, see if you like it. And if you do, you can bet with them all season long. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Until then, stay safe. Remember, the right way is always the 49ers way.